So your training leading up to the universe, as far as how it relates to now, which is for a totally different goal, different thing. What was that like? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was 5 days a week, and it was shoulders, arms, posterior chain lower, a pull day, quad dominant lower, and then a full upper body day.
That's right. I remember that. And you did the 5 days just to spread out that volume a bit more during contest prep because is that easier from a recovery standpoint, you found, at least personally?
Yeah, I did, but also I think already from a skill standpoint, I've improved a lot when it comes to first of all identifying what was actually generating the most of the progress. So it's like, okay, let's trim the fat, and then also from my movement execution, my movement selection. So all the 3 day split really did is like, all right, I just made budget cuts. I was like, right, this is what's moving the needle. Let's do this stuff. And I've actually joked around with the fact that I might do 3 days a week when I prep because I think it's gonna maybe allow me to get to deeper levels of body fat because I know for me, after especially like a tough lower body day, don't schedule big projects afterwards because I'm gonna be garbage, right?
Right.
So it's very similar to how a hard day at work and if you're training after can make you feel not so good for your session. So stress is stress at the end, even when it comes to the stress that we get from this thing we love, training. So the way I look at it is dieting is harder when you have stressful days. And by having only as much stress as I require on the training front, it's going to allow me to dive deeper when it comes to how lean I can get.
Okay, see that I can understand for sure, especially with the leg days, the grueling leg days, or even like a heavy upper body day, like a lot of compounds maybe in an upper body day. The next day, I'm not really useful from a training standpoint, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's facts, right? So I've learned to appreciate the recovery aspect in between sessions, right? Versus my younger days where you get a little bit too eager and for reasons that I can still appreciate in my younger days, of course, because I just didn't have the skills in those younger days. Just like I'm sure when you look back, you're like, okay, but that was for that time, right? But as you develop these skills, it's just, yeah, you get so much more efficient with this thing, right?
Yeah, Cassim Hansen said something a few years back that like stuck with me. That was that bodybuilding is a sport of over recovery, and I think we tend to forget that. Sometimes we're like, especially with the training set, we're like, bodybuilding is a sport of being proactive. Let's do this just in case. When so much of what matters is like, how's your game outside the gym? So a lot of people, when they're stuck, they try to look for things inside that gym, and it's like maybe you're just doing something fundamentally wrong when it comes to how you handle your life outside the gym. It could be as simple as like your sleeping arrangement, how you manage stress, relationships, friends that you might have that are causing you stress. It's worth digging into just as much as you might want to be trying to split hairs between what your leg day should look like.
Right, right. Yeah. Staying up in all hours of the night, trying to fiddle with your program. It's like, bro, go to bed. You're disrupting the
Yeah.
next day's training session, right? You already know because I know I've been there. And I know anybody who's in this has been there who loves this whole training thing and the programming and all that fun stuff, right?
Yeah, it's not the bodybuilding you imagined when you started, but it's just as important.
Right. What is it about, I think a lot of bodybuilders just in general, when it comes to contest prep, that from what I've observed, I can only go based upon that, that there's this need to want to add more during contest prep. Let me do a fourth or a fifth day. But then all of a sudden in the off season, you're doing 3 days. And you're going to speak to this more accurately than I'm giving you it now. But I have this thought that maybe it's because you want to leave no stone left unturned. You're getting ready for a contest. You default back to that, like more is better, right? What do you think about that though? Do you think there's some legitimacy to that?
No, it's a very common mistake, I think, especially
Mm,
with newer bodybuilders. I think a lot of it just comes down to not trusting what you know. Because if you're pretty sure that this is what's doing what, then you have that basis covered. If you're like, okay, these 3 exercises for my biceps in these sequence, that has me covered. I thought about this deeply. It makes sense. And then you get to these points in the prep where you always feel behind. You always feel like you're not looking right. Just bound to happen to everyone, where you start to not trust this plan that at some point when you're clear-minded you put together. And it's almost, I think for some bodybuilders, hard work is kind of like their blankie. It's like their safe space, because I mean, think about it. Early on it gets us out of so many situations. Like, that is the answer is like, I think you had 4 more reps in that leg press, but then eventually it does get to a point where actually you might want to leave a few more reps in reserve in a number of these exercises when you're prepping, and that feels unsafe. You don't trust that. So
mm.
to me, it just shows that whatever you think you probably haven't thought about as deeply when you're in a more peaceful state of mind, which is outside of the contest prep.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that'll have people thinking. From all the people I've spoken to, like all the natural bodybuilders, a lot of them at the world-class level, right? Like let's take a Ben Howard, for example. This guy trains like 3 days a week, right? When I saw you do it, I'm like, huh, you start thinking about it in a different way. Like, and then all of a sudden you dropped it to 3, having more recovery, and you start to break past these plateaus, if you will. I don't know if we can call it that. It's just, you start to see numbers go up in a way that they weren't before when you were training a little bit more. So did you have an experience with that when you shifted down to 3 days, just from having a bit more recovery, like from a progress standpoint?
I saw, metrics going up. I think also the post-contest period recovery was very efficient. Like I didn't get that weird body fat storage that everyone gets post-show. It all goes to the gut. So I'm like, wow, this is the appropriate amount of stress for this period in time. And I just stayed in tune with that. Man, quite often your body is telling you, once you get to the point where you know how to work hard enough, your body is telling you like what's right and what's wrong. But I think people tend to ignore those signals. And I think that is something that, especially elite athletes, that sometimes we view as like maybe they're lazy. Yeah, sometimes there's things they can be doing a little bit better, but I think they get such immense biofeedback from their training that they kind of know to like Jeff, for example, to like, you know what, this is plenty. All right, I'll leave it here. And that's a combination of, again, like being clear-minded when it comes to your assessments, and then also just, again, listening to your body in real time. This is kind of in the powerlifting world, but I was discussing this with the other coaches in a meeting. It was Ray Williams, world-class powerlifter, squats over 1,000 pounds, drug-free. I remember it was before 2015 Raw Nationals. Like he was just feeling off. And I remember he just posted this in his Instagram story. It was just a picture of him doing leg extensions. And he's like, my body's telling me like, I just need to leave it here. So I'm just leave it here and I'm gonna leave it to God. And I'm sure a lot of noobs that were just out there grinding away were like, that's so backwards, but right. He ended up having a sensational meet. He showed up. He actually lifted very well that day, so it worked out. There's a time to push, but then there's also a time to pull, and kind of learning what the right ratios of that are under different circumstances it's a skill worth learning. And I think one of the stepping stones to mastery in this domain. I'll start with this. There's a little bit of privilege like when I say this, because I've been fortunate enough to have a good amount of winning. When I look at my resume, I think my last 3 amateur shows, like I won overalls. So not just my division, but the overall. I don't have as many pro wins, but